The Ford GT90 was a car that was built by the Ford Motor Company. Its main goal was to be a successor to the iconic Ford GT40 and failed Ford GT70. It was designed to be the American supercar that would take on European exotics. It was supposed to be the Ford GT40 of the future. Just like its predecessor, the Ford GT40, it came with help from the British, being built off of a Jag XJ220. Due to budget limitations and being released at the wrong time, it ended up being one of the biggest what-ifs in Ford's history. In this episode of A Car in History, we'll go over the Ford GT90. The Ford GT90 was built to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the original Ford GT40, but during the 1990s, there wasn't much available from the Blue Oval in terms of performance. The Ford Taurus SHO, Ford Mustang, and even the Ford F-150 SVT Lightning weren't enough to keep up with cars like the Ferrari F40, Jaguar XJ220, Bugatti EB110, and the McLaren F1, which would be the benchmark for the Ford GT90. Ford needed to return to the drawing board to create something new. The 1990s for automotive manufacturers wasn't exactly a revolutionary era in terms of design. Rounded edges and bubbly designs may have defined the 90s decade for Ford, but they didn't align with what Ford was aiming for. What Ford needed was not another vehicle, but a symbol, something powerful enough to reignite excitement within the company and bold enough to get the entire automotive world talking. Development for the Ford GT90 began in 1994 with one clear objective: to make its debut at the 1995 Detroit Auto Show, which was only 6 months away, with an entire research and development budget of $3 million. To take on a project of this magnitude, Ford went to Tom Scott and head of SVT John Coletti. Their mission was bold: to create the world's mightiest supercar. Led by Tom Scott and John Coletti, both teams faced the immense challenge of transforming this vision into a reality. Starting from nothing, and forging an automobile unlike any other that had came before. Even with Scott and Coletti at the helm, their idea needed a spark to get off the ground. That spark came from James Hope, one of Scott's engineers, who put the pen to the paper to capture what Ford wanted. James Hope's sketch had a mix of bold, flowing curves and sharp, aggressive angles. It looked like a Ford GT40 from the future. In this situation, it was easier said than done. Ford had to create a chassis that could accommodate the GT90's intended proportions while still acting as a blank canvas for the designers. Ford decided to look across the Atlantic Ocean with help from Jaguar, who was owned by Ford at the time. The Ford GT90 is based on the Jaguar XJ220, which featured a bonded and riveted monocoque chassis built from lightweight aluminum alloy sheets and reinforced with aluminum honeycomb in high-stressed areas. The GT90 also carried over the XJ220's double wishbone suspension and 5-speed manual transmission. To accommodate what Ford needed for the GT90 project, the XJ220's wheelbase was lengthened from 103.9 inches to 116 inches. The Ford GT90's body panels were built from a mix of carbon fiber and fiberglass. To protect the bodywork near the exhaust outlets, Ford used high-temperature ceramic tiles similar to the ones found on the Space Shuttle. As mentioned earlier, the transmission was sourced directly from the Jaguar XJ220, which was a 5-speed manual developed by FF Developments and Ricardo, which drove the rear wheels. Developed entirely by the SVT division, the GT90's engine was built by taking two Ford modular 4.6-liter V8s, cutting them in half to form a V6, then machining them together to form a V12. Its development remained in complete secrecy, hidden under the hood of a Lincoln Town Car. The block and cylinder heads are made from aluminum. The block features a bore of 3.55 inches with a stroke of 3.04 inches, displacing a total of 362 cubic inches. The engine features a dual overhead cam valve train configuration. The GT90's V12 incorporated 4 Garrett T2 turbochargers. In terms of styling, the GT90 marked a sharp break from Ford's traditional design language with its bold, futuristic, and aggressive lines. It embodied what Ford would later call its new edge design philosophy. The interior of the GT90 featured exposed metal surfaces met with vivid blue accents, merging the spirit of the 90s sports car with the intensity of a race car cockpit, featuring a racing bucket seat with a 4-point racing harness and exposed gearshift linkage. The design integrated the window and roof into a single seamless component, and active aerodynamics with the wing that can pop up for added stability at top speed. With the Ford GT90 being a spiritual successor to the Ford GT40, the Ford GT90's doors are designed with the roof built into the upper section, giving them a look of a horizontal guillotine when opened. This design draws from inspiration from the iconic Ford GT40, preserving the low-profile race car aesthetic while providing a functional entry and exit if you're not too tall. Even the rims were carefully crafted to honor the original Ford GT40, featuring knockoff-style hubs that echoed the classic race car design. The tires were made by Goodyear and featured GT90 etched into the tread. Running 275/35 ZR18s for the front and 355/30 ZR19s for the rear. Another cool technological feature the Ford GT90 came equipped with was blind spot monitoring. The whole package of the Ford GT90 came in at around 3,200 pounds. Ford met their goal to debut at the 1995 Detroit Auto Show. At first, the GT90 failed to impress both Ford executives and the automotive media, but the general public loved it. At its release, Ford initially claimed a base MSRP of $150,000. According to Ford, the GT90 would make 720 horsepower at 6,300 RPM and 650 pound-feet of torque to 660 pound-feet of torque at 4,750 RPM, with the red line between 6,300 RPM and 6,500 RPM. In terms of acceleration, Ford claimed the GT90 would hit 60 miles per hour in 3.1 seconds, hitting 100 miles per hour in 6.1 seconds, passing the quarter mile in 10.9 seconds at 140 miles per hour. With the top speed between 235 to 253 miles an hour, passing the McLaren F1's top speed of 231 miles an hour, which later reached a top speed of 243 miles per hour in 1998. Ford was never able to get the Ford GT90 to back up its claims because the GT90 was still a prototype. Ford never pushed it to its full potential, concerned that the prototype components couldn't handle the extreme power. Most famously, Jeremy Clarkson drove the Ford GT90 on top gear and was only given a 400 horsepower tune since the turbos weren't connected. The Ford GT90 was only available for 1 year in 1995, and during its concept stage, only one unit was ever built. Despite the Ford GT90 never being driven to its fullest potential, it was still a good look at what Ford was looking to accomplish for not only the time being, but for the future of Ford vehicles, lighting a fire in the engineers and designers to push bigger. The harsh reality behind why the Ford GT90 never reached full production came down to cost and company politics. At the time, Ford acquired both Jaguar and Aston Martin to serve as its performance and luxury divisions, making it impractical to produce a car that would directly compete with its own brands. Another major factor was the GT90's underpinnings. They relied on the Jaguar XJ220's chassis to bring it to production. Ford would have either had to dismantle the Jaguar XJ220 or design an entirely new chassis from scratch, both of which presented significant challenges. Ford would soon shift their focus and still continue the Ford GT40 project into the next century, unveiling the Ford GT40 concept at the North American Auto Show in Detroit, Michigan in 2002, which would then go on to be the 2005 to 2006 Ford GT. Although Ford ultimately pulled the plug on the Ford GT90 concept in real life, its legacy lived on in the virtual world of video games. The futuristic supercar appeared in titles like Gran Turismo 2, Need for Speed 2, and the Sega GT series, as well as later games like Ford Racing 2 and 3, Project Gotham Racing 3, and mobile game Top Drives, allowing gamers to experience the quad turbocharged V12 and its radical design even after it left the prototype stage. The Ford GT90. It was an ambitious attempt to create a modern supercar, envisioned as a spiritual successor to the legendary Ford GT40 and short-lived GT70. It was designed to challenge European exotics, and it was meant to be the GT40 of the future, and like its predecessor, the GT40, it benefited from British engineering expertise, being built on components from a Jaguar XJ220. However, due to budget constraints and arriving at the wrong time, the GT90 never reached production, leaving it as one of the biggest what-ifs in Ford's history and in automotive history.